Laura, the betrayed wife in suburbia. Laura Mitchell had always believed she was living the American dream. Nestled in the heart of an affluent New Jersey suburb, her house stood at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, lined with maple trees and kids' bikes scattered on immaculate lawns. She was in her late 30s, confident and composed, a project manager for a tech company, a beloved neighbor, the woman who somehow managed to bring homemade pies to every block party. Her husband, Mark, was a successful civil engineer, friendly and easygoing, the guy who manned the grill during summer cookouts. Together, they were the couple everyone admired, stable, generous, and seemingly happy. Laura's best friend, Jessica Taylor, had moved in just 2 blocks away after her own divorce. Jessica was vibrant, witty, and always up for a hike or spontaneous margarita night. Their friendship stretched back to college. They had weathered breakups, job losses, new babies, and awkward double dates together. To Laura, Jessica was almost a sister, a constant part of her suburban symphony. For years, Laura's life was a series of comforting routines. Shared morning coffees with Mark on the back porch, Sunday grocery trips, watching Jessica's kids with her own, laughing over charcuterie boards, and stories of old boyfriends. She cherished this web of connection, the sense of safety in knowing exactly where everyone belonged. Everything began to change, though Laura at first barely noticed. Mark started working late more frequently, often blaming deadlines and new clients. Jessica seemed distracted during their get-togethers, her stories rambling, and her phone always close at hand. Laura brushed it off. Everyone was busy, perhaps a little stressed. She had no reason to suspect that beneath the smooth surface, the two people she trusted most were drawing closer together, bound by secrets they shared behind her back. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Laura's world tilted off its axis. Mark had left his phone in the mudroom, and it buzzed with a flurry of messages. Laura never snooped, but something, an inexplicable chill, a wife's intuition, made her look. There, illuminated on the screen, were words that couldn't be read as anything but proof. Messages from Jessica, unmistakably intimate, dancing around plans to meet up when Laura was out of town on business. For a moment, her mind refused to make sense of what she saw. The kitchen around her blurred. The illusion of safety and happiness shattered silently. Laura felt suspended between two realities, one where she was still loved and protected, in the stark new world where trust had been betrayed. At first, she didn't cry. She didn't scream or confront Mark or call Jessica in a rage. Instead, Laura stood perfectly still, listening to the hum of her refrigerator, the distant sound of kids playing outside. All the years of laughter, vacations, shared confidences, they seemed to dissolve around her, leaving her exposed and alone in the center of her carefully constructed life. That afternoon marked the end of everything Laura thought she knew about her marriage, her friendship, and, perhaps, herself. But it was also the moment something inside her hardened, an unyielding determination to take control, no matter what it took. The betrayal would not define her. She would choose, quietly and deliberately, what happened next. The collapse of trust shock hits Laura like a silent explosion. No noise, just a cold, paralyzing wave. It settles over her shoulders in the kitchen, where sunlight still slants in across the marble countertops, and the gentle scent of roasted coffee lingers from breakfast. This place, once the heart of family warmth and everyday affection, suddenly feels unfamiliar. Everything is the same. The wedding photo on the fridge, the row of hand-painted mugs, the scribbled grocery list. But none of it means what it did the day before. Inside Laura, disbelief and pain begin a brutal tug of war. Her rational mind tells her there must be an explanation. Maybe a misunderstanding, maybe an innocent joke. But the words she read on Mark's phone are burned into her memory, sharp and undeniable. Each syllable, each teasing emoji from Jessica, unspools 1,000 moments Laura had previously trusted. Mark's late nights, Jessica's distracted smiles, the sudden awkwardness when she entered a room. She replays each scene, groaning inwardly at how expertly the two of them deceived her. Questions spiral. How long had it been going on? Did other friends know? Was every happy memory just an elaborate lie? A hot flush of shame and humiliation follows. Laura feels exposed, as if her entire community could see straight through her. The image of herself, the smart project manager, good mother, perfect partner, fractures. Who was she, if not someone her husband loved and her best friend respected? Laura paces blindly around the kitchen, gripping the marble counter for support. Tears prick her eyes, but she holds them back.
I'll take this one, please.
Not yet. Not here. Anger bubbles up, sharp and sour. Anger at Mark's cowardice, at Jessica's betrayal, at her own trusting heart. She wants to scream, to throw plates or punch a wall. But more than that, she wants answers. In her mind, it all plays out. Confrontation scenes filled with shouting, accusations, maybe even empty apologies. But Laura isn't ready for theatrics. She knows deep down that a single angry outburst won't bring her peace. Instead, her hurt condenses into something else, a cold determination to see the truth for what it is. She listens to the refrigerator hum, the distant laughter of neighborhood children wafting through the window, the faint tapping of rain against the glass. Time feels strange, stretched thin, the present moment standing still, while the past rewrites itself behind her eyes. Laura senses the death of innocence in these small details. The comfort and naivety that had wrapped around her life unravel, thread by thread. The realization cuts deeply. Her marriage, her closest friendship, even her sense of belonging in this world. None of them are what she believed. But underneath the wreckage, something else flickers. Amid the breathtaking pain, Laura vows that she will not look away from the truth. She will rebuild herself from the ground up, no matter the cost. The collapse of trust, though devastating, becomes the crucible in which a new resolve is forged. The veil of pretended forgiveness. Laura's decision came not with fireworks, but with a quiet, resolute patience, honed by years of project management and motherhood. In the hours and days after her trust had shattered, she allowed herself moments to unravel alone, crying behind locked bathroom doors, screaming into her pillow when the house was empty, running until her legs burned. But in front of Mark and Jessica, she wore a different mask, the serene, loving wife and undaunted best friend. This was her greatest performance, and every gesture, every word was chosen with the precision of a surgeon. The morning after, Laura greeted Mark in the kitchen with a soft, "Good morning," folding herself into the familiar routines they had built for over a decade. She poured them both coffee. There was a tremor she had to fight in her hands, but she kept her voice light. "Don't forget, Jess and I are going to brunch on Saturday," she reminded him, as if nothing in their world was amiss. Mark looked tired, guilty, maybe, but determined to hold on to normalcy. He offered a quick smile, grateful for her steadiness, and Laura wondered if he sensed the icy undercurrent beneath her warmth. That same day, Laura texted Jessica a meme they'd laughed over the week before. "You coming over for iced tea later?" she typed. injecting her message with the kind of natural friendliness that had defined their friendship for years. Jessica responded with a heart emoji and a promise to bring lemon bars. When Jessica arrived, the two women sat on the back porch, children's laughter echoing from the next yard, the summer air heavy with honeysuckle and the hum of cicadas. Laura listened as Jessica chattered about work and her latest fitness craze. Every smile, every joke, it was all performed, a pageant of normalcy. The irony was suffocating, and yet Laura matched her friend beat for beat. Inside Laura's mind, however, everything was calculated and observed. She cataloged their glances when Mark came home early from work, the seamless choreographing of space between them when they thought she wasn't watching. She tracked Jessica's use of her phone and the slight stiffening in Mark's shoulders when Laura mentioned upcoming travel for work. Over the following weeks, Laura elevated her act to an art form. She hosted the usual Friday night barbecues and invited neighbors, playing the part of the cheerful hostess, the one who never let a glass go empty, who artfully redirected awkward silences, who included Jessica and Mark in every group photo. She initiated movie nights, potlucks, and game evenings. Her home, the very heart of suburban warmth. Privately, she marveled at her own discipline. Mark and Jessica seemed relieved, almost grateful, to fall back into fixed routines. The more Laura played into the comfort of the familiar, the more their guard dropped. They trusted her composure, never suspecting the storm that brewed just beneath her placid exterior. Some nights, Laura would lie awake and let her mind drift back over the past. The first time Jessica confided in her about her ex-husband's coldness, Mark's career milestones they'd celebrated together with champagne on the back deck, the innocent, mundane rituals of family pizza nights and school fundraisers. She let the pain roll over her, but she also sharpened it into resolve. She knew that, in this polite war of attrition, patience would be her greatest ally. The act was not without its challenges. There were moments, piercing, white-hot, when anger threatened to break her mask. Once, she watched Mark and Jessica exchange a fleeting look during a neighborhood trivia night and felt her hand tighten into a fist beneath the tablecloth. On another occasion, Jessica hugged her, whispering, "I'm so grateful for you, Laura." And Laura nearly choked on the bitterness, but she only smiled, tucked a stray hair behind Jessica's ear, and returned the hug a beat longer than usual. Truthfully, Laura discovered a certain power in her role. By pretending not to know, she controlled the narrative. She dictated how each day unfolded, which conversations happened, and when silences were allowed to linger. Mark grew even more dependent on her emotional steadiness. Jessica, too, began to lean on her for support with her kids and sought advice on everything from home decorating to dating apps. That last one nearly made Laura laugh aloud from the surreal cruelty of it all. In public, Laura and Jessica were inseparable. Their daughters played on the same soccer team. Their sons traded Pokemon cards in the living room. Their husbands, at least to outside eyes, remained cheerful friends, sharing laughs over beers as if nothing was wrong. Neighbors remarked on how lucky Laura was to have such a supportive best friend living just blocks apart. Sometimes, Laura found dark amusement in these observations, savoring her ability to maintain a flawless performance. Beneath the thickening cloak of routine, Laura relentlessly gathered information. She found herself noticing things she'd once ignored. The rhythm and content of text messages visible on Mark's lock screen, changes in Jessica's perfume or her schedule, the way Mark avoided eye contact when Laura made small references to honesty in conversations. Piece by piece, she assembled the evidence she needed. She made quiet appointments with a lawyer under the pretense of work meetings to learn about asset division and legal strategies. She documented everything: receipts, digital footprints, casual admissions, the subtle pattern of Mark transferring money between accounts. Her preparation was methodical, but masked by a perfect consistency in her outward relationships. Sometimes, the effort of pretending exhausted her. There were days when she locked herself in the bathroom, staring into her own eyes in the mirror and wondering whether she was losing herself in all the roles she played. Yet she always found the strength to return to the charade. Every day she acted, she gained ground. A little more time, a little more advantage, a little more clarity about who Mark and Jessica really were and who she could become in the aftermath. With each passing week, Laura felt less like a victim and more like a strategist. She learned to compartmentalize, to separate the aching grief of loss from the calculated planning of her future. Each carefully executed family dinner, each laugh at the block party, was a step toward something larger: her own justice, defined on her terms. The facade became her shield and her weapon. What no one understood, not Mark, not Jessica, not even her closest neighbors, was that Laura's forgiveness was never real. It was only a pause, a space in which she could rebuild herself and prepare for the reckoning she would soon deliver. She had chosen her part in this twisted play, and she was determined to see it through to the end. By the time autumn's chill settled over their sleepy cul-de-sac and golden leaves blanketed the sidewalks, Laura had transformed her pain into purpose. She was no longer just the betrayed wife, but a quietly powerful architect of her own fate, waiting, watching, and ready for the day when the mask would no longer be needed and the truth could finally reshape all their lives. The silent revenge plan, Laura's quiet resolve, crystallized into action in the weeks following her discovery. Her pain never vanished. It simply became more organized, sharper, a fuel she quietly sipped from while she orchestrated her careful, unseen campaign. Her approach wasn't impulsive or born from rage. Rather, it drew on the calm, meticulous discipline she'd honed as a project manager. If the mask of forgiveness was her shield, then secrecy became her greatest weapon. Gathering intelligence. Her first step was surveillance, but not the kind that attracted attention. Laura became a diligent observer, cataloging Mark and Jessica's habits, messages, excuses, and patterns with almost scientific precision. She revisited the digital artifacts, texts, old emails, voicemail logs, with a detective's eye, learning to decode the language of secrecy between two people who thought themselves clever and unseen. Every deleted message, every calendar entry that didn't add up became part of her growing web of documented evidence. Beneath the surface, Laura became a data collector. She installed password protection on shared devices, making sure that any sensitive information from her end stayed confidential. When Mark was careless with his phone, she noted call times, recurring contacts, and subtle behavioral changes after conversations. With Jessica, she paid close attention to her faint shifts in mood, abrupt rescheduling, or the moments when Jessica's smile faltered if Laura mentioned certain dates or business trips. Building financial leverage. One of Laura's most strategic steps was securing her financial independence. Quietly, she began combing through all joint accounts. Her approach was cautious. Under the guise of household budgeting, she requested full access and paper statements. She digitized every receipt, flagged recurring transfers, and charted out the patterns of Mark's recent financial activities. When she noticed small but regular transfers to an unfamiliar account. She dug deeper. Posing as a financially prudent wife, she suggested they move part of their savings into a newly opened account with better interest. Mark, eager to please and placate her, agreed. He failed to realize that Laura was the only signatory on the new account. Gradually, she began moving money, bit by bit, until a significant portion of their liquid assets were under her exclusive control. Laura met with a lawyer whose office was conveniently just across the street from her company. During lunch breaks, dressed in her professional best, she slipped away for discreet consultations on asset protection, divorce statutes, and the legal nuances of infidelity in New Jersey. She learned about irrevocable trusts, about how best to document marital assets for equitable division, and about the paper trail required to make her case airtight, should it come to that. Psychological play. Laura's revenge wasn't only monetary, it was emotional. She understood that Mark's greatest vulnerabilities weren't only in their accounts, but also in his self-image and social standing. When she encouraged him to take on more household expenses, trips, repairs, lavish dinners for friends, she did so gently, never raising suspicion. Mark, enjoying the adulation of neighbors for his generosity, leaned into the role of provider, unaware that Laura was setting him up to become more financially dependent on her by the week. With Jessica, Laura initiated more shared activities, suggesting projects that strengthened their friendship. Co-chairing the school fundraising event, organizing large playdates, even combining weekend plans with other couples. Every request drew Jessica deeper into Laura's orbit, making it harder for Jessica to withdraw or change her routine without being noticed. Under this gentle social pressure, Jessica found herself confiding more, sometimes even letting slip careless details about her whereabouts or Mark's involvement in certain errands, documenting without a trace. In the evenings, after the kids were asleep, Laura meticulously cataloged everything. She stored digital files on an encrypted flash drive she kept hidden at the bottom of her oldest purse, along with handwritten notes containing passwords and dates. No printed paper, no visible clues, just an unbroken chain of evidence and preparation. She set up a second email account, one Mark didn't know existed. From it, she consulted divorce forums, joined online support groups for betrayed spouses, and even reached out to a local private investigator for advice, testing out the language she might one day need to use in open court. The investigator, a woman named Michelle, proved invaluable in explaining how to build a legally sound case without tipping off the guilty parties. Laura took notes on witness statements, the value of timestamps, and even the benefits of gathering small, corroborating evidence from neighbors who'd noted Mark and Jessica's coincidental late-night walks or coffee runs. Strategic patience. All the while, she maintained her mask. The laughter at family cookouts, the patient listening during Jessica's confessions, the warm embrace whenever Mark returned home. The hardest part was resisting the urge to reveal her disgust. Some days, just the sight of Mark's hand on Jessica's back during a group photo felt like an iron spike through Laura's chest. She learned to tuck away those moments, letting them cool into memory instead of boiling over into confrontation. Patience was more than just waiting. It was acting. She staged subtle tests, suggesting possible vacations or changes to household finances, watching carefully for irritation or resistance. Each reaction confirmed her suspicions and provided fresh data for her plans. She even confided in a neutral party, her childhood friend Amy, who lived out of state, using vague anecdotes for plausible deniability. Amy's outrage and quiet support became Laura's lifeline, helping her decompress just enough to stay rational, focused, and unsuspicious at home. Choosing her moment, Laura understood there would only be one chance to strike. And when she did, it had to be definitive. Every secret meeting, every password and bank statement, every overheard conversation was a chess move, preparing her for the endgame. She practiced her delivery in the mirror on sleepless nights, rehearsed the words she would use, and visualized the silence that would follow when the curtain finally dropped. She told herself this was not revenge. It was self-preservation, an act of rewriting her own story, while the people she once loved blindly rewrote hers behind her back. Laura's silent plan was a steady, relentless tide, eroding the ground beneath Mark and Jessica's feet, until they would finally stand exposed and powerless, and she, at last, would reclaim her sense of control. The knife in the night, the plan didn't require fire or fury. It demanded surgical precision. Clean, quiet cut, delivered when Mark and Jessica least expected it. Laura knew what she was about to do would leave scars, but not on herself. For weeks, she had been sharpening the blade, gathering secrets the way a jeweler collects rare stones, waiting for the precise moment when her actions would have the greatest impact. The tipping point, the night Laura had chosen, felt almost ordinary. The fall air outside was crisp, carrying the scent of burning leaves from the neighbor's yard. She sat at the kitchen island, her command post, reviewing the digital cache she had assembled on her password-protected laptop. Records of suspicious withdrawals, screenshots of text messages, a timeline of clandestine meetings between Mark and Jessica, and a running log of every time her name had been lied to. When all the pieces were in place, Laura moved to the next phase. She would pierce the bubble of secrecy surrounding Mark and Jessica, but instead of recklessly exposing them, she would do so in ways that were deniable and devastating, sending ripples through their most sacred relationships, whispered confessions, anonymous revelations. Using a burner phone she bought in cash months earlier, Laura began contacting those closest to Mark and Jessica. Her voice changed, just enough, pitched low, unemotional, a calm, disguised confidence. She picked her targets carefully. She started with Mark's older sister, Ellen. Their relationship had always been close. Ellen had often claimed she trusted Mark more than anyone. Laura dialed late one evening, knowing Ellen's household would be quiet and her attention undivided. "There are things you should know about Mark," Laura said, using a voice modulator she'd downloaded after reading advice from an online support group. "Ask him about the money he's been sending to private accounts, and about Jessica, his supposed old friend." She hung up before Ellen could ask a single question. For Jessica's family, the approach had to be different. They were scattered in several states and connected mostly by an elaborate web of group chats, Facebook messages, and the occasional family reunion. Laura drafted emails, anonymous, using a masked IP address, containing only hints. Ask Jessica about her real relationship with Mark, one email read, and about the lies she told last Christmas in New York. She attached no threats, just facts, dates, flights, unexplained photos from Jessica's own social media accounts, cleverly gathered and repurposed. Then, one at a time, Laura reached out to people just adjacent to the inner circle. Mark's friend from college, now working in finance, who always disdained dishonesty.
This is hopeless.
Jessica's work partner, obsessed with reputation. Even Laura's own mother-in-law, who had long been suspicious of Jessica's constant presence. "It breaks my heart to say this, but I think you deserve the truth," she wrote, hand trembling but resolute. "You may want to. Check the bank records. There's more going on than you realize." None of the communications could be traced back to her. Laura used every digital trick she'd researched: encrypted browsers, proxy emails, call redirectors, becoming invisible even as she became the agent of revelation. The power of secrets. The first cracks appeared quickly. Mark came home one night, distracted and flustered, mumbling about family drama and how his sister had called out of the blue, pressing him about ridiculous rumors. He tried to joke, to play off her concern, but Laura saw the anxiety in his eyes. Jessica grew more withdrawn over the next few days. She started canceling brunches, dodging Laura's calls, claiming her kids were coming down with something, or she had late meetings. But the world of suburbia is held together by whispers. Within a week, friends exchanged glances at the grocery store. Neighbors' conversations dropped to a hush when Mark and Jessica passed. The slow accumulation of suspicion was, to Laura, its own victory. The knife gliding beneath the ribs, unseen but painfully felt, twisting the blade, bringing the past to light. Laura made one final move before the climax. She collected every embarrassing, self-incriminating story Jessica or Mark had told her over the years. Mark's failed business deal that no one in his family knew about. Jessica's secret credit card debt and toxic fights with her ex. Each secret was a potential spark, and Laura fanned them skillfully. A series of anonymous text messages, each containing a question, not an accusation, arrived in the inboxes of the people who mattered most to her betrayers. "Did you know?" they started. Or, "Wouldn't you like to ask Jessica about? Is Mark really as faithful as he says?" Each delivered at times calculated to leave Jessica and Mark isolated, unsure of where to turn or how much had already been exposed. Meanwhile, Laura watched, silent and vigilant. She kept her outward persona warm and calm, but if one looked closely, they might have seen the satisfaction flickering beneath her usual composure. A private triumph. Not just vengeance, a strategy for survival. For Laura, these acts weren't simply payback. They were calculated moves on the chessboard of her new reality. By ensuring Mark and Jessica's reputations unraveled at the seams, she was preemptively defending herself against any narrative they might spin if things turned public, if, or rather when, their marriage ended. No one would cast her as the villain or the clueless, hopeless spouse. By controlling the flow of information, she transformed herself from victim to author of the story. And if sometimes the guilt crept in, if she caught her pale reflection on a dark window pane and wondered where the woman she used to be had gone, Laura reminded herself of every lie, every midnight Mark had spent working, every friendless morning she'd endured, because Jessica had been too busy plotting elsewhere. This was survival, not just retribution, the storm on the horizon. As autumn shadows lengthened, Laura anticipated the next and final act, but she wasn't hasty. There was poetry in letting the seeds she'd planted grow, their roots twisting through the households and hearts of everyone she'd once trusted. She slept more soundly than she had in months, though always with her phone within reach, ready to record, ready to respond, always a step ahead. Each day, the world felt a degree lighter. Mark and Jessica, growing more desperate and isolated, withdrew into themselves, searching for leaks in their walls and finding only confusion. Laura watched and waited. She knew the beauty of a cut so clean that the pain came seconds later, when the wound was too deep and the bleeding had already begun. The knife, in the end, was not a weapon in her hand, but a silent force that moved through whispers, secrets, and well-placed doubt. A cruelty she wielded with precision, wrapped in the mild, enduring kindness of the suburban wife she had long ago ceased to be. The climax, under the spotlight Thanksgiving, had always been the quintessential family affair for Laura. A day woven with gratitude, laughter, and the comfortable rituals of suburbia. This year, though, the holiday was charged with a shivering tension Laura carried alone, invisible to the others. She had meticulously selected this day, knowing the time was ripe, that her carefully laid traps had been sprung, and her adversaries, her husband Mark and her best friend Jessica, were dangerously off balance. Now, surrounded by their extended family, friends, and neighbors, amid the golden glow of fall, Laura would deliver the final blow, not in rage, but in measured, unyielding composure. Setting the stage, the Mitchell home bustled with familiar chaos. Mark's sister basting the turkey, children trading stories in their blanket fort under the dining table, holiday music humming in the background. Laura moved through her house with practiced ease as she set the table, draped in autumnal linens, gleaming with polished silverware, her heartbeat even, her smile indistinguishable from any other year. Her mother-in-law commented on how serene she looked. "You always keep everyone pulled together, Laura," she said, unaware of just how much Laura was holding inside. The cast assembled, Mark's parents and siblings, Jessica and her children, invited out of tradition, their presence and unspoken code, close friends from several blocks away, and a few neighbors who never missed Laura's signature pumpkin pie. It was a wholesome tableau, the surface placid and lovely, but underneath, Laura knew, fault lines vibrated. Secrets newly seeded by her anonymous revelations had begun to fracture the relationships in this room. At the dinner table, Mark looked exhausted, but was trying to maintain appearances, laughing a little too loudly at his father's jokes, keeping the wine glasses topped off. Jessica, always quick-witted, was quieter than usual, her glance darting to Laura with a nervous uncertainty. The room pulsed with questions left unasked, tension so palpable that even the distant clang of cutlery seemed sharper. The gathering storm. Laura waited, biding her time as the meal unfolded. She listened to the conversations, forced laughter, Mark's awkward deflections, when his sister quipped about mysterious texts. Jessica's brittle explanations for why she'd been so busy and hard to reach lately. Chatter spiraled in the kitchen over coffee preparations. In the living room, a cousin asked about Mark's work trips, joking about all the late nights. With every casual dig, every sidelong look, Laura could sense her preparations working. Uncertainty and suspicion now nestled between every polite phrase and strained smile. But her plan was never about humiliation for its own sake. Laura wanted clarity, wanted the people closest to them to see the truth for themselves. She had orchestrated this moment so that denial would be impossible, and excuses, should they come, would sound thin and hollow in the glow of family candor. The revelation dessert was served, the kids running off to the den in a sugar rush. Laura poured coffee, lingering by the living room archway as conversations drifted. She cleared her throat gently, voice steady, and addressed everyone. "I hope you all know how grateful I am to have you here. Really, truly grateful. Family means everything to me." Mark looked up first, smiling expectantly, clearly believing she was about to say something sweet. Laura met his eyes, then Jessica's, and continued. "But family is built on trust, and sometimes, when that trust is broken, it leaves behind a silence none of us know how to fill." The room hushed, the background music stilled, as if on cue. "There are things that have happened in this house that none of you know about," Laura said, her tone unwavering, careful to meet the gaze of each guest. "Things that have hurt me deeply. Things I think deserve to be named, not hidden." Mark's face drained of color, his fork clattering against his plate. Jessica froze, her hand hovering over her mug. Laura inhaled, the total years of her silence, her performance, and her grief coalescing into this one luminous act. "For quite some time now, Mark and Jessica have been carrying on an affair behind my back. I found out weeks ago, but I didn't want any drama. I just wanted the truth to come out in front of the people who matter most to us." Shock tore through the room, a collective, inescapable intake of breath. Mark tried to speak, but Laura's tone brooked no interruption. "You can check the messages. You can follow the trail. I haven't hidden anything. I have copies, if anybody wants to see how deeply the deception went. This is not a plea for sympathy. I just don't want to live in this lie any longer." The aftermath in real time. Emotions detonated in slow motion. Mark's mother burst into tears, clutching her napkin in disbelief. Mark's father stood, jaw clenched, unable to look at his son. Siblings exchanged horrified glances, while Jessica's children looked back and forth between the grown-ups, fear and confusion darkening their faces. Jessica herself tried to speak, voice trembling. "Laura, please." But Laura simply raised a hand. The guests' reactions ranged from stunned silence to furious accusations, whispers layering with gasps as the devastating truth settled in. Some attempted hasty explanations, while others demanded details. One uncle asking in disbelief,
"Did not do it.
"How could you do that to
I
Laura?
have nothing to hide."
To all of us?" Jessica shielded her face, shame rippling through her in ragged breaths, while Mark appeared hollow, his every excuse dying in his mouth. Laura stepped away from the table, choosing her next words with the same calm determination she had demonstrated throughout her ordeal. "I have made my decisions. My lawyer has the documents. I will move out next week. Please, help the children understand. I know this is hard, but it's the only way forward." Claiming the truth by declaring the truth with all eyes upon her, Laura took back ownership of her own narrative. She did not shout or break down. Instead, she stood as an anchor in a swirling tide, her poise more impactful than any accusation. She was no longer the betrayed woman, locking herself in a bathroom to cry. She was the author of the reckoning, the one who would not erase the reality of what had happened. The conversation that followed was a mixture of pain and clarity, questions, apologies, anger, even moments of silent support as family members gravitated to Laura's side. She felt the bracing air from the open window, the murmur of voices behind her, the weightless relief of shedding her mask. Outside, night had truly fallen, but the living room was aglow with truth, a harsh, necessary light illuminating the faces of everyone present. In the hush that followed, Laura felt, for the first time in months, an undeniable sense of peace begin to flicker within her. She had survived the storm and delivered her justice under the warm and watchful gleam of the spotlight, with the entire world she valued as her witness. The resolution, the price to pay. In the weeks following Laura's stunning revelation, time became a strange, distorted thing for everyone involved. The Mitchell household, once the epicenter of warm laughter, holiday celebrations, and neighborhood gatherings, transformed into a husk echoing with the aftershocks of truth. Each inhabitant, each neighbor, each friend had to reckon with what had changed. Trust had been obliterated, not only for Laura, but for everyone who had invested in the illusions that surrounded her marriage and friendship. The fallout, for Mark, the price was immediate and steep. The very moment Laura spoke her truth, he'd felt as if the floor had opened beneath him, dropping him into a world where none of the old rules applied. His parents withdrew behind a wall of disappointment, a parent's grief sharper than any words. His siblings, whose easy camaraderie once defined their family gatherings, now regarded him with a mixture of awkwardness and anger. At work, Mark lost his focus, his once reliable hands trembling over engineering plans, his phone silent in his pocket when it used to buzz with neighborhood invitations. People at the firm glanced away in the break room or spoke to him with forced politeness. His reputation, built on years of solid friendships and unspoken trust, fractured irreparably. Rumors circulated, whispers amplified by those who had previously admired his marriage and envied his life. Even at home, Mark wandered the rooms as if in a dream. The children, too young to understand all the details, but old enough to sense that the world was off its axis, watched him warily. He tried, at first, to make amends, offering practical help, suggesting counseling, proposing a clean break from Jessica and a new start. But each attempt only underscored his helplessness and the finality of what he'd destroyed: Jessica's social exile. For Jessica, the price came in the sudden, almost theatrical reversal of her status in the community. Once the life of every gathering, now a ghost at the edge of every conversation, she became the subject of relentless gossip and silent judgment. Playdates and book clubs were canceled. Texts went unanswered. Her children, once inseparable from Laura's, suddenly found themselves outsiders on the playground. Jessica tried to apologize, weaving through explanations and tearful confessions. She sent Laura messages, pleas for forgiveness, offers to meet privately, long confessions in the middle of the night that Laura never answered. Her own parents, having received one of Laura's shattering anonymous messages, called frequently, their disappointment carrying a burden the entire length of the country. Jessica's world shrank to a few rooms and a handful of family members willing to listen, but everyone else retreated. She faced the yawning chasm that guilt and shame produce, forced to reconstruct an identity on shaking ground. Laura's journey through grief and freedom. For Laura, the aftermath was both devastation and liberation. In the days after Thanksgiving, she walked through her home in silence, everything packed with memories, but irreversibly changed. When she sat at her kitchen table, finalizing paperwork with her lawyer, she felt the strange satisfaction of taking back control mingled with the ache of necessary loss. Packing up was an act of both mourning and renewal. She boxed up relics of the past, family albums, wedding gifts, children's crafts, and realized each object could no longer anchor her to what once was. There were moments when she lingered and cried, wiping away grief in the privacy of her empty bedroom. But more often, she found herself propelled forward by an unfamiliar but welcome current of resolve. The divorce settlement was lopsided in her favor, a reflection of her meticulous preparation and steady nerve. She retained the bulk of their shared assets, negotiated a fair schedule for the children, and secured a new apartment in a distant city. She had chosen not to stay, not to rebuild among the ashes and memories. Instead, Laura wanted a clean slate, a place where she could reclaim her independence and dignity on her own terms. The children's fragile healing. Laura's greatest concern and lasting heartbreak was for the children. She spoke with them gently, avoiding blame, emphasizing that no matter what had happened, Both parents loved them deeply. There were tears and angry silences, questions she couldn't completely answer. And one night of panic, when her youngest son begged her not to leave. Little by little, Laura nurtured their resilience. She found a compassionate counselor, enrolled them in a new school where no one knew about the scandal, and began inventing new family traditions. Christmas was spent in their new apartment, with a tiny tree and takeout pizza, a modest but authentic celebration of survival and hope. Facing the world anew, Laura's move to a new city felt like stepping through the wardrobe in a children's book, unfamiliar, sometimes lonely, but shimmering with possibility. She found comfort in small rituals, early morning runs along a river path, lingering over coffee at a quiet cafe, discovering new parks with her children. While she grieved what she'd lost, she cherished what she had gained in equal measure: her self-respect, her freedom, the knowledge that she had faced a tidal wave and survived. Making friends was slow at first. Laura joined a book group, volunteered for a community project, and found herself surprised by her own laughter during a neighbor's barbecue. She noticed she stood taller, never apologizing for the shadows in her past, drawing strength from what she had endured. The scars remained, but they became evidence of her ability to heal. The price for all. In the wake of the drama, the price was paid not only by those at the heart of the betrayal, but by the entire community. Friends who had admired the Mitchells now struggled with doubt, questioning what they knew of their own marriages, of the secrets that might linger behind closed doors. The once unshakable routines of block parties, potlucks, and neighborly gestures resumed, but always with a new wariness, a humility born of witnessing a private storm erupt in public. Mark and Jessica, finding little respite in the ruins, each stumbled through the aftermath alone. Mark retreating into work, moving into a smaller apartment. Jessica quietly searching for employment in a new town, hoping for anonymity. Neither attempted. Reconciliation, finding that shame and regret made poor companions for new beginnings. Laura's last word. Sometimes late at night, Laura replayed it all in her mind, wondering if she could have spared anyone the pain. But ultimately, she recognized that the price of her freedom and integrity was paid in the currency of shattered illusions. She had not set out to burn bridges, only to refuse to live upon the ashes. On the cusp of her new life, Laura stood, not as the victim nor the avenger, but as her own person. She carried forward hard-won wisdom that the collapse of trust is devastating, but the rebuilding of dignity is possible. The price had been excruciating, yes, but in its wake came a freedom as clear as winter sunlight, cold, bright, unflinching, and real.